This episode of The Minimalists is brought to you by nobody, because advertisements suck.
The Minimalists.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Minimalist Podcast, where we discuss what it means to live a meaningful life with less. My name is Joshua Fields Milburn. Ryan Nicodemus is not here today because today we're going to talk about hormones. So I wanted a woman to be here, and it just so happens that I know a woman.
Just one.
My wife is here. Rebecca Shern is here. Also, Adam Lamb is here because I actually wanted a person who really knows about hormones. So Adam Lamb from renewliferx.com is the website. We're going to be talking to you today, Adam, about, well, we've got a bunch of audience questions, but I thought this was perfect because Bex and I have really been reassessing our sort of life as we approach age 40. We are starting to question and figure out what is optimal for us as we get a little bit older. And so I wanted to talk about hormones, both female and male hormones, and how they change as we get into our 30s and 40s and 50s and beyond. And I want to talk about what we can do to optimize our hormones to get the best out of life. How our hormones affect our sleep, our stress, our mood, our energy, our sex drive. And then also the opposite of that. How does our diet and sleep and sunlight and exercise affect our hormones? We're also going to talk about hormone testing today because that's I think a critical component of all of this. So I've noticed recently, Bex and I were just talking about this, we haven't had many women on the podcast recently. That isn't for trying. Like the last couple weeks, actually what was it, Sean? I think we've had 5 weeks in a row where we've had to reschedule different women for being on the podcast. So they've rescheduled, I guess, because of I hear there's a pandemic going on. And it's a bit more difficult to get here right now, right? And so Bex is here. I want to talk to you about your hormones. Adam, I want to talk to you about her hormones as well.
Right.
She's very hormonal.
We all are.
No, Adam, when we talk about hormones, it's this catch-all term, right? It's kind of like saying sports in a way. What do we mean? Because vitamin D is a hormone, but testosterone is also a hormone. What are we talking about when we talk about hormones?
Yeah, and it's a great question. I think that probably one of the biggest disservices to hormones is we talk about it as a blanket statement. You know, even when you look at, you just mentioned sports and you see somebody, you're like, oh man, look at the genetics on that guy. That's hormones. It's not like necessarily genetic. They genetically have good hormones that are helping them be optimal from a performance standpoint, for example. I think that there's just different hormones through our life that matter more, especially for women, as estrogen and some of the progesterone and the things that help with baby making are important. But when you're done making babies, it's not as important. It's still important because they're all important. We want to have balance. And so we really have to go through, what we do at our company is go through individually and see like what is important to you, because what leads people to us, it's not like they look in the mirror and they go, man, my testosterone must be off, right? They feel things, they read things, they research things. And then we do a blood test and we confirm what they believe and what they feel. And we find out what needs to be optimized. In that.
Right. And because I think most of the time, like when I got and we have some test results printed out here, before and after tests for me and Bex, which we'll try to get to, if not here, at least on the Maximal episode. But, I didn't know much about DHEA. I mean, I knew about testosterone and its role, but all of these other sort of ancillary hormones, and they're all sort of working together, right? They're not standing in separate corners of the room here.
Right. Yeah, there is a harmony between the hormones, and a lot of times too, there's misconception behind hormones. So when we talk about testosterone, we primarily think men, right?
Right.
We don't think it's a big factor in women. I can just think of a female friend of mine. She's 31. She was just in her office, and I'll use her as an example. You look at her, she's fit, she's good looking, works out all the time. You would say there's nothing wrong with you. But she knows that based on how she's eating, how hard she has to work out and those things, she knows there's something off, right? But she's 31. She should be healthy. She looks great. We check her blood work. She has the testosterone of a 70-year-old woman, right? And so the things that she knows about herself, we don't know outside. And even, your average OBGYN or doctor would say, hey, look, you're looking good. You're fine. You must be fine, right? And so, but it can also then change. Her cycle hasn't been normal in 6 months. And so like all these other things, got married and they compile, right? And often we overlook what could be going on that you can't solve, which is potentially a hormone issue. And then there is some things to do around it.
And Bex, you noticed this in your own life. Like,
Yeah,
to
it
me,
sounds similar.
yeah, you were the sort of paragon of health to me, but you also noticed there were a few things off. And if you, I think if you go to your average doctor, and even if they look at some test results, they might say it's fine, and you use that word
Right.
fine.
It's normal.
Right, normal, but normal isn't optimal or even good necessarily.
When you look at the range on a test, you're like normal. And I always use the joke kind of, hey, if I had the decision to pay you $30,000 a year or $120,000 a year, which one do you want?
Right.
I want the 120, right? And so if you want your hormones to be optimal, do you want the low or do you want it's normal, right?
Yeah.
And so that's something that we kind of chase after, is not so much the number as much as how the number reflects how you feel and how healthy you are, right? Because that's the other factor, because you can feel great and things aren't going on inside that are good too. So we always look at those things.
Well, the other thing too is especially in the U.S. population, and I'm not sure where the reference ranges come from, but like normal in the U.S. is not healthy,
Right.
right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
I would argue far from optimal for
Yes.
most people, or at least for people that are striving to feel better, to perform better, to look better, perhaps.
And that's the number one thing, is most of the people we work with are paying attention to what they eat. They're paying attention to how they move, like exercise, whatever their thing is. And they're noticing that things aren't adding up anymore. Right. And it's part of it. Sometimes we chalk it up. You're just getting older. Well, so what? Like, what does that mean? I have to like not be as happy and I shouldn't get the results from the effort? Like, and then people throw in the towel, or we look at it and say, yeah, we can just optimize this and this. And all of a sudden you're back to feeling how you want to feel, which usually promotes better health anyway. Right.
Right. Well, I was going to go in that exact same direction. Like, as you age, and if you're still putting forward the effort, but not seeing the results, and you're feeling kind of worse and worse, then you're like, well, screw it. Like, why am I doing this?
I'm gonna
And you
have
just
the
kind of
experience.
keep
Right.
letting it slide, and it perpetuates that sort of,
It does.
fall into
And then that's
middle
kinda
age, later
moves
age.
into that degeneration of our bodies, and because you were exercising, now you stop, so now you're not as strong. You're more likely to get injured as you're older and things like that. And having strength as you age is what's going to help you avoid major pitfalls, like at those. Like I think we're young, but like that 70s and 80s. I hope we all get there and keep cranking through. And I want to be like annoyingly energetic, to, like my grandkids.
Mark
Exactly.
Sisson level of
Yeah.
like fitness.
Yeah.
And I mean, clearly he optimizes things. Now, Bex, let me talk to you about what were you experiencing that made you start to say, well, maybe there's some tweaks that need to happen even before getting a blood test.
Yeah. So over the course of the last winter,
And we should say you're 21 now.
exactly. Thank you.
So we're both 38, to be clear.
Yeah, I'm 38 now. I was 37 this winter, but yeah. So I generally struggle a bit with like seasonal affective disorder. Thankfully, since I've been able to come back and forth to LA from Montana, that's been better. But it was bad this winter. And it was not just seasonal affective disorder. It was like, I feel depressed,
A malaise that has slipped
Yeah.
into sort of sadness.
Yeah. And there wasn't like any dietary reason. There wasn't really any tangible lifestyle reason. I was still, getting in good workouts or putting in effort. I wasn't seeing the results that I wanted. So
And
that was
can make
another.
you more depressed. 'Cause then
Exactly.
you're like, why? It'd
Yeah.
be one thing if you're hitting ice cream every night, right? Or if you
Right.
just stopped working out and you knew why.
Yeah, no,
Right.
no. And so it just felt like this cycle of like depression, lack of energy, lethargy, malaise. And like I was getting crushed by my workouts. That was one thing that was just like a huge red flag. Was I was not recovering. I was having trouble getting through them, despite not really changing anything on the diet front. So yeah, that was kind of.
And I think there were some other things there. There was sleep, right? Some sleep issues, and we'll go more into sleep. But there were just some signs. In fact, I've got this article that we'll talk about on the Maximal what to know about hormone imbalances and some of the symptoms to say, well, you've got hormone imbalances. Name something that could go wrong with you, and it might have something to do with hormone imbalance in a way, right?
For sure.
Changes in heart rate, brittle, weak bones, difficulty sleeping, irritability and anxiety, increased thirst, headaches, bloating, reduced sex drive. These are all things that I want to talk about today. Now, Adam, you at Renew Life RX, your company, which is based in Houston, but you deal with people all over the place.
Yeah, we're nationwide. So we have physicians throughout the country. I just physically sit there. It's a telemedicine hormone replacement therapy. So the reason we do that is it started with a lot of our client base were people that needed the service of helping facilitate that process, right? To get to the doctors, get the blood work, get it all organized. And so we built it really at a more of a high touch point customer care service, not like a usual medical experience, right?
And this is the question I've been asking recently over the last couple of years is, as I'm getting older, is hormone replacement therapy right? But what I like about your approach to all of this is you tend to make sure people have the other boxes checked first. It's not putting a Band-Aid on a problem. If I'm eating Twinkies every day and out drinking at night and not sleeping much, and I'm not exercising, you at first you checked those boxes to make sure I was doing the appropriate things before asking, okay, if you've optimized these areas of your life, now maybe, and you ask questions like how do you sleep and what are your sleep patterns and stuff. Once that's figured out, that's when you look at the hormones, right?
Yeah, it all matters. And we want to go into this with the right expectation, right? So like if you're eating fast food 5 days a week and you're drinking 6 beers every night on the couch and you're about 50 pounds overweight and you haven't worked out since you were in college, we're probably not the first place for you, right? You may need Tony Robbins, right? Someone just to motivate you, get you going. And so, but the folks that are, like I said, paying attention, right? Like what Becca said, she just noticed something was off, right? Or we just noticed like, there's no reason why I shouldn't have the libido I have today, or there's no reason why like my body I'm doing the same stuff. It's not working, right? So they're paying attention. We have a solution for that. And then going through that conversation, right? We talk about how you manage stress. What does your life look like? Because when we can get a little bit of a grip and some awareness on other things about like sleep, for example, people, no one sleeps good, right? So we always are trying to figure that out. And then Ben will talk about different sleep routines, right? So sometimes I'm watching something stressful on the TV and then try to hop in bed and fall asleep. That's not going to work as well as having a 20-minute stretch routine and screens down. So we just try to bring that awareness to that stuff to say, hey, listen, this isn't the magic pill or this isn't the magic process of hormones, but we're definitely going to help these areas so that you can actually manage some of these other areas.
We've got some questions from our audience today. I thought we'd go ahead and dive into those. Our first one is from Hannah in San Diego. She writes in and says, how does stress affect our hormones? And I guess I would have pinned that question by saying, what else affects our hormones? And how do we naturally regulate our hormones? So some of the things you just touched on there. But how does stress negatively or positively affect our hormones?
Well, when you think of other parts of our hormones, like the fight or flight hormones, right? So if everything is an emergency, everything's 911, every ping in your phone, every email, like all that stuff, your cortisol levels are cranking, your adrenaline's cranking, like you're just always stressed. And when you're doing that, you're flooding your system with hormones that are not necessary, right? Because you're psychologically managing something a little bit different. So that is, it just crushes DHEA levels and testosterone levels. And it really can cause a lot of bad balance in the body, right? And so that's why, like I said just a second ago, we talk about stress. We talk about what stresses you out. How do you manage? You live it, and we can look at someone's DHEA levels and just say, hey, look, we can increase DHEA. It's a supplement you can get over the counter and actually help regulate your cortisol levels so that you can sleep better and that you may find less stress, less anxiety, right? And it's just having the right hormone sometimes in the right place that's needed. But your stress and my stress and Becca's stress can be different. So we all need something different. And the best way to figure that out is to look at the blood work, right? Because it doesn't lie. Yeah. And so we have a motto, we say, stop guessing and start testing. It's kind of cheesy, but it's real, right? It works.
That's good.
Some of the other things though is, especially testosterone too often is equated to working out and strength and athleticism and muscles and stuff like that, which scares women often. But the reality is testosterone can help from confidence, right? Just like I could say, if your testosterone's low, I could say, hey, Josh, good new haircut. And you could be like, oh man, Adam doesn't like my haircut. But if your testosterone's high, you might say, oh, all right, glad, yeah, I'm looking good. And it's a difference of how sometimes we see ourselves based on where our hormone levels are, right? And testosterone can be a big indicator you're thinking of decision making better, right? Less wish-washy on things and all that stuff, confidence, and all those things come from our hormones.
Right. And it's having the right amount as well, because you can also look at, the average prisoner in America. The prison population has some of the highest testosterone in our country as well. And I have a doctor friend of mine who brings this up every time we talk about testosterone. And my retort to that is, you can also look at the NBA and find some of the highest testosterone
100%.
as well. And so it's having the optimal levels. Now, Bex, when we did the tests, you were shocked by how low your testosterone levels were.
I was both shocked and not shocked.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe shocked and relieved because you had an answer to, which is usually the goal, right? Find the solution.
You want to talk about that?
How low my testosterone was?
Yeah, sure. Because women don't think, especially a woman your age, you're not really thinking about I need to increase my testosterone. Even though you do effectively what I would call CrossFit workouts, it doesn't have that moniker, but when I see what's going on at your gym, it's basically that.
Yeah. I guess prior to doing the testing, I just assumed that I'd have decent testosterone because, I do weightlifting, weight training, and not just high reps, low weights. It's throw weights around. But it also didn't surprise me. I was on birth control, the hormonal birth control for
over a decade.
Exactly. And I'd done some prior research after getting off that, my sex drive was just gone. And so I realized at that point that oftentimes the hormonal birth control that many women on, especially young women, we kind of do this pattern where when we're young, we do the hormonal, daily birth control. And then we kind of graduate from that to some others, maybe longer form birth control. And then, maybe in our 30s or after we've had a couple kids, we start considering an IUD, which is a more permanent, less fussy remedy. But when I got off the hormonal birth control, I just started doing some research, and apparently it really blunts your testosterone production, and that afterwards it doesn't come back.
We see women, so we don't work with a lot of men under 30, but we do work with some women under 30 because birth control or even having a kid can, I can think of a 23-year-old girl who's healthy, fit, had a baby, and just jacked her hormones up, right? And so what the cool thing with women, younger women, is sometimes adding testosterone for a short amount of time can restart the wheel, and then they renormalize, because once you get the testosterone up to where it should be, the body's like, oh yeah, we felt better here. That was great. And then you can pull it out and the body will continue to do it almost to that extent.
Nice.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. As we get older though, our body's not as resilient, and it doesn't want, especially for guys, you can have an injury riding your bike and hit yourself injury, a testicular injury, something like that. And just you have low testosterone. That actually happened to me. I had low testosterone at 23, but I was fit. I worked out like a maniac. So the doctor's like, what do you really want this for? But, and so that was something that it helped me become a little bit more compassionate to people who have these needs, and there wasn't really a solution out there for them to get it done.
Yeah, I know with me, any doctor I went to with my testosterone levels, they always said it was normal, right?
Right.
But it didn't feel normal. My libido wasn't non-existent, but it wasn't great. And I just didn't feel consistent. I didn't feel the energy. And so what we did after looking at my blood work, which we'll go over here in a bit, was determine okay, maybe we need to add a little bit of testosterone in to see if that changes the way that you feel. And there were a few other things that we looked at as well, DHEA and for sleep, etc. And I think we're at this phase where we're still tweaking a little bit and figuring out what works and what won't work, and what is the more permanent solution. But I can tell you, and I thanked you personally, but I might as well thank you on the podcast here. Like, we've made some significant changes, made significant tweaks that are like pivots. But if you make a 15-degree pivot in one direction, you end up in a completely different destination a month later, 2 months later, 5 months later. And that's really what I'm learning here. It's not the magic pill or bullet or whatever, or magic cream, I guess, in this case. What it is it is a way for us to enhance the already good habits that are there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that what's great too is a couple doing that journey together, we see the most success too, because there are a couple things. Sometimes we can be resentful when one of the spouses is feeling great, right?
Yeah.
Or the other side of it is, think of it about two individuals in a place that love each other, they're attracted to each other, but like they're like, I don't even know why I don't want to like pursue intimacy and that playfulness, and that can be hormones, right? And then it could lead to just a bunch of other things. But if their hormones are optimized, now they're a little bit more like, hey, I don't want to, and then you're playful, and it's good for the relationship, and like all of that stuff could come from just having better hormones.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's important.
That was one thing that stood out in the questions that got asked. There were 130 questions or something
About hormones?
about hormones. So I solicited
on her Instagram.
Yeah, I solicited for questions for this. And
at Minimal Wellness, by the way, if you want to follow her.
Yeah. And not a single question. I think they were all from women, to be fair. But like still, not a single question about sex drive. And that just blew my mind. Well, I think we're often in public, we're embarrassed to talk about these things. Yeah.
Because they think, look, something's wrong with us.
Right.
And it's not, but it just can be a hormone imbalance.
Yeah, or you know what? If something is quote unquote wrong, it's okay to have something wrong, especially if you're trying to pursue some sort of solution toward improving it, right? And with me and Bex, like, we've had a great sex life for the last 5 years, but I can tell you recently it's been even better. And so like by tweaking a few things, now she has to like hide in the bathroom and lock herself in there. I'm chasing her around the house and stuff.
But I think it's fun. I think it could potentially save relationships.
Absolutely.
It could save marriages, and it can save the way you look at yourself and all those things. And that's what really got me in this space 10 years ago, because I saw that outcome of it. I was like, whoa, that's powerful.
Yeah. Well, we got another question here. Before we get to that, Hannah, let me send you a couple tickets to our tour stop. We're going to go on tour in a few months here, and we have a stop in San Diego. We have we're taking the podcast on the road to a bunch of cities. You can find the dates over at theminimalists.com/tour. We're going to have a guest in each city, also a musical guest. We're going to do a live version of the podcast and some other special things as well. Theminimalists.com/tour to find a city near you. If your city isn't there, you can just enter your email address. We'll notify you when we are coming to the city closest to you. But Hannah, we'll send you a couple tickets to our San Diego event. Diana from Instagram has a question. What's the link between hormones and anxiety and depression? Is it different for women than it is for men? So, Adam, Bex was talking about this earlier. Like there was something that was off this winter, and it can be seasonal. It can be a lack of vitamin D, which is a hormone, right? Now, do you find that it's different for men and women, and what hormones contribute to this anxiety and depression?
Yeah, I think that the number one thing we believe is testosterone is a good foundational hormone to address first.
And why is it the silver bullet for so many people? Because it seems like when you fix that, other things fall in line. Yeah,
it's because it's like a dominant hormone, right? So, when you think of testosterone, you don't think of like wimpy, whiny, little, right? You think big, strong, and that's really like what it can do in your body. So it can change just how you respond to things, how you react, things like that. And so just from the question about stress and anxiety, like some things may not bother you if your testosterone's optimized, but if your testosterone's low, it's going to affect you more. You're more likely to be bothered by it. And testosterone, when testosterone's in a place where it should be for your body, where your body's happy with your testosterone levels, other areas regulate too, whether it's estrogen, estradiol, which are both important for men and women, DHEA levels, even thyroid issues. We see every time just about. We see thyroid function improvement when testosterone is optimal, right? So instead of loading someone with thyroid and didn't even check that, like a woman in particular, didn't even check their testosterone is super low, potentially elevating their testosterone to a better level for their lifestyle could eliminate the need for any thyroid intervention, right? And so some of those things are just never looked at.
That makes sense.
With how many people are on thyroid medications, especially women,
It's
that
the
seems
most
like
overly prescribed
Yeah.
hormone drug in the country, without
You
a
deal with
doubt.
a lot of people through Minimal Wellness, minimalwellness.com, by the way. And a lot of people just mention thyroid like right away, right? It's like
Yeah.
a thing that comes up. And I think often it's a guess.
Everybody's
too, right?
got a thyroid issue. It's kind of like, and sometimes we see their blood work. We're like, no, you don't. You actually don't. You may have a discipline issue with your nighttime eating or something like, or you're an extreme person that like, like I think when like the competitive fitness people a lot of times are like, the extreme diets and stuff like that. You can jack your thyroid up, like all kinds of different things, stress and stuff like that too. You can jack your thyroid up.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, Diana, let me send you, because one other thing to think about with respect to depression is your values. And we have a free values worksheet on our website, theminimalists.com/V. You can download that. There's also an essay there called How to Understand Your Values. And I think quite often we experience anxiety, not specifically depression, but anxiety we experience quite a bit when our actions don't align with our values. Well, if you don't know what your values are, it's pretty hard to align your daily actions with your long-term values. So I want you to get really clear on what your values are. Ryan and I believe there are 4 different types of values, and there are specific examples there over at theminimalists.com/V. You can check that out. All right, it's time for our lightning round. Adam, Bex, this is where we answer questions from the text message questions from our audience. You can text your questions and comments to 937-202-4654. Those texts literally go to Ryan's and my phones. We answer as many as we can via text, but we also answer some here on the podcast. Now, Adam, during the lightning round, this is where we do our best to answer questions with a short, shareable, less than 140 character response. We call them minimal maxims. Podcast Sean puts them in the show notes so people can copy and share our pithy answers on social media if they'd like. All of our pithy answers are now in one place as well, minimalmaxims.com. Really, we just ramble on a bit until we get something that's tweetable or not.
Got it.
Kimberly has a question for us. Bex, you want to read this question for us?
Yeah. So Kimberly asks, what's the best way to determine hormone levels?
Blood work.
Tweet it. That is pithy. You had a good pithy answer earlier. What about the testing? What was the
stop guessing, start testing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I mean, that is the thing. We often hear you can't manage what you don't measure, and that's really the same thing. I mean, for me, my pithy answer is actually in that same vein. It's hard to fix a problem without a name.
Yeah.
And so sometimes, like this winter, Bex, you were like, something feels off. Well, feels off is not a diagnosis, really, right?
And hard to fix a problem without a name can also lead to depression too, because just when you reach that point of like, I can't solve this. Like, I'm no longer qualified to figure out what is going on with me, and I don't even know where else to begin. Right? That's going to take you to depression.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you can be a resource and go things like the blood work and say, oh, guess what? Your testosterone's real low. That's why. And you're like, right. The answer is there. And now we feel better. We feel confident because there's potentially a path of what we can go into. And it's game changing. And
if people want to do a test, they can just go to renewliferx.com. You can
just fill out the information. One of our wellness coordinators will call them and roll them right through the process.
And by the way, I don't get anything for telling you to go there. I want to be clear, we don't do any advertisements or anything like that. It's just Adam's helped both of us, and I thought this would be really compelling for our audience, both men and women, because a lot of people are starting to ask that question. They feel like Bex, where I feel like I'm doing things right, but something is off. I felt the same way, and something was off, and then getting the test made a lot of sense. Also, we got COVID test through you. That's how Bex and I found out we thought we had COVID, but we knew definitively after doing the antibodies test, which are on your website as well.
Yeah, we can sometimes just add that to the panel if people want to get that done. And so just the hormone panel is, it's usually, unless we do something special, it's right around $300, which is the testing, the overview and all that stuff, which is pretty affordable to potentially solve a major question going on in your life, right?
Yeah. Considering how good we feel right now,
yeah,
it's a very good investment.
Good.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
That's good to hear.
Bex, you have something pithy for us?
Yes. I said data is good, but it's useless without corrective and supporting lifestyles.
That's the other thing too, because you can get this test and look at it and frame it and look at it every day, but if it doesn't mean you make some sort of corrections in your own life, in your own habits, or in supplementation if necessary, then it's just data, right?
And there's some times where everybody we see doesn't mean we help. Like if we can't help you, we're not going to help you from that standpoint, but we definitely are going to at least try to direct you in a place to where, we just look at some other things and figure out. We had a guy recently whose testosterone was like through the roof high, and his sex hormone binding globulin was through the roof high, like highest I've ever seen. I've probably seen 10,000 people's blood work. You know what I mean? The highest I've ever seen. That's why I told him, I said, listen, I want you to understand, it's not like, oh yeah, you're kind of high. The highest I've ever seen.
Wow.
And so we just advised him on somewhere potentially local to pursue, like just to see what's going on. And because it's very unique and different, a little bit out of our wheelhouse potentially.
All right, well, before we get into our added value segment today, it looks like we got a bunch more surprise questions this week. Here are a few of them. I'm dead set against hormone replacement therapy. Do I need more education? We'll talk about that. Also, we're going to talk more about how diet, sleep, sunlight, and exercise affect our hormones. We'll talk more about sex drive. We're going to talk about skin and hair health and how that's tied to hormones for sure. We're going to talk about acne problems, pregnancy, birth control, hypothyroidism, and mental health. And we're also going to review Bex's and my before and after hormone test results. And we're going to talk about how we made some subtle improvements. Actually, we made some subtle changes that made big improvements in our life. Plus, we got a million more questions for Adam Lamb. And if you want to hear all that, check out our Maximal episodes on the Minimalist private podcast. It's a completely separate podcast, and it's just a couple bucks. And it's the most honest way for the Minimalists to earn an income because we don't believe in advertisements. So we make money only if you find value in and support what we create. Head on over to theminimalists.com/support to subscribe and get your personal link so that our private podcast plays in your favorite podcast app. And here are some voicemail comments and tips from our listeners this week.
Philly from the UK here. I've been catching up on your podcasts and occasionally hear people who want to give up convenience shopping, such as Amazon, to help them avoid mindless consumption. This won't work for everyone, but I have found that I can often completely switch off the desire for a brand if I look into their production in more detail. This could be the way they treat people, the planet, animals, how they deal with toxic waste, what they invest in, and so on. In the UK, this information is easily found with the magazine Ethical Consumer, but I do pay to subscribe to them. Some of their research is free. I don't know if there is a US equivalent, but they do cover many global brands. I find this helps me create a barrier to easy consumption, and it has helped me avoid acquiring countless items over the past few years, and also ensures that I'm very intentional about what I do buy. Hopefully this could help others too.
My name is Betsy. I'm from upstate New York. I have a message for Jean, the woman on your podcast about building a tiny house, and she was looking for ways to minimize her kitchen. I recommend looking into an Instant Pot. It's all-in-one pressure cooker, slow cooker, rice cooker, yogurt maker. It's best if you YouTube or Google it rather than listen to me rave about it, but it sure saves a lot of space and it saves on extra appliances.
All right, y'all, for this minimal episode, that's it for now. I want to thank you, Adam Lamb, for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I'll encourage folks to go to renewliferx.com. Also, we didn't get a chance to talk about this, but maybe we'll get to it on the Maximal episode. You wrote a book called Better Than the Binge, Overcoming the Social Obligation of Alcohol. So we'll put a link to this book in there as well because, there are a lot of people who struggle with alcohol or maybe don't even realize that they struggle with alcohol and become dependent on it without realizing they're dependent. And the thing I often hear is, well, I'm not an alcoholic. I just drink 4 or 5 times.
There's always somebody worse, right?
Yeah.
So that's like, oh, I'm not as bad as Jim, so
right.
I'm all right.
Right. And so you talk about your own journey of letting that go for 90 days and what that did for your life and then how you move forward from there. We'll put a link to that book in the show notes as well. But renewliferx.com will be in the show notes for folks to check out as well if you're interested in testing or if you have any questions for Adam as well. For added value this week, I was going to recommend Lionel Shriver's new book, but Bex and I, since Bex is here, we've been reading a book at night by James Fry called Katerina. So Bex and I we read together every night.
That's awesome.
and like right before bed.
He
And-
reads to me.
Yes.
We don't
yeah.
read together.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Right.
would love for my wife to read it.
And so
Very
yeah.
relaxing.
But it's funny because we're talking about testosterone and hormones and all this other stuff, and it's a very sort of sex riddled book.
Oh,
And
Yeah, I was
so,
like, you're really
yeah.
going to recommend it?
Yes, it's it. Yeah, I'm going to caveat it.
That's awesome.
It's funny because reading it out loud often leads to sex immediately after.
There you go.
So it's
We didn't realize it was that way when we
No.
started the book.
no, but
There's
it's
another
beautifully,
disclaimer.
it's beautifully written as well,
Yeah.
and it works very well auditorily. So a great book. James Fry, Katerina. We'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. That's our added value this week. And real quick for right here, right now, here's one thing that's going on in the life of the minimalist. We have a side project called Minimalism Life. It's sort of the best of minimalist well-being, so that's the minimalist, and then also minimalist design. That's our friends over at Minimalissimo, Carl in particular, and then minimalist travel, our friends at 5 Style. We came together and we started this side project called Minimalism Life, and it's the best of minimalism from all walks of life. And the website for that is minimalism.life. If you want to follow beautiful photos of Minimalism Life, you can do that on Instagram as well. It's just at Minimalism Life on Instagram or at Minimalism on Twitter. It's a great side project. It's really beautiful. We have 3 writers over there who also write about minimalism. You can find all kinds of architecture and design, free wallpapers, minimalist wallpapers for your smartphone or desktop as well. Minimalism.life is the website. You can follow The Minimalists on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at The Minimalists. Come to one of our live podcast shows. Just visit theminimalists.com/tour to find a city near you. If you have a question, comment, or minimalism tip for our podcast, email a voice memo to podcast@theminimalists.com. You can comment on this episode at youtube.com/theminimalists. And if you want our show notes in your inbox, sign up for our email list over at theminimalists.com. You'll also receive our simple Sunday emails whenever we send those. And if you leave here today with just one message, we hope it's this: love people and use things, because the opposite never works. Thanks for listening, y'all. We'll see you next time.
The Minimalists.